Hey, what up everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you. Yesterday we had the start of the return of Jon Jones. Jon Jones was able to put all of the problems that were behind him that came out before UFC 187, where basically Jon Jones was stripped of the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship, a title that he held and showed basically no sign of ever giving up. Jon Jones was probably one of the most known, one of the most dominant UFC fighters that there were. He was able to step up and beat anybody that came after his championship. He was going after record after record. I believe that honestly, one of his dreams of his UFC career was to have the light heavyweight championship and sort of have the most successful victories and break that record before he was going to retire. But due to him being stripped of the championship and due to the fact that they did not go with an interim champion like they've done with Jose Aldo got injured, and Conor McGregor is the interim champion, and they're finally going to have that fight somewhere down the road. Jon Jones was stripped of the championship to deal with all of his problems. If you can't remember what went down, basically Jon Jones ran a red light in New Mexico. He hit another driver who was in another car that was going through the intersection that had the green light. The woman happened to be pregnant, and from there, Jon Jones just went into just full on, just crazy mode. Jon Jones ended up not checking on the driver in the other car that he caused the accident with, and said he fled the scene, running away. Only to, return back to the scene of the crime minutes later, to once again not check on anyone in the other driver's car, but to go to his car, grab a pile of cash from the car, run away, and jump a fence and leave the scene of the crime to not turn himself in to, I believe, 2 to 3 days later. There were lots of rumors that were flying around basically saying that Jon Jones was on some sort of type of drugs. Of course, Jon Jones had failed a UFC drug test, which he had gone through everything before, and basically people thought Jon Jones was in a bad place in his life, and he's gone to court. He had to go through everything. He got put on basically a probation charge, where he'll be on probation for 18 months. During these 18 months, he has to do 72 appearances, where he'll be doing charity work as well as speaking to children. Once he completes the 18 months and the 72 appearances, he'll go back to court, where basically he'll have a discharge of his crime, and the felony conviction will be removed from his record, and he'll go on being a normal guy. The one thing that you could look at this is that basically Dana White was in court with Jon Jones. You can definitely tell that Dana White does not want to lose Jon Jones as a fighter. He basically even made a quote saying that Jon Jones would get a shot at the championship, that he never lost inside of the octagon, as soon as Jon Jones is ready to basically fight. I don't know how they're going to take the recovery train for Jon Jones. I know that this Saturday at UFC 192, we have Daniel Cormier, who is the light heavyweight champion now, who is basically Jon Jones's biggest rival. If you think about Jon Jones fights that were built up by Smack Talk, Daniel Cormier and Jon Jones, the last fight that they had, did big numbers because of the fact that you really believe that these guys did not like each other. Daniel Cormier called out Jon Jones as being fake and not being the guy that you all think he is. Daniel Cormier does not have a weak opponent, though. Alexander Gustafsson is one of my favorite fighters inside of UFC. I've been watching this guy's fights for a few times now since he's popped up on the scene. The one thing I like about Gustafsson's story is that basically if you go back to 2011, he went into a fight where he was sort of like, I guess you could say that he was one of the hottest fighters inside UFC. He was really catching a lot of steam. He had won, I believe, 9 fights in a row. And he just was sort of, it wasn't his first fight in UFC. It might not even have been his second, but he came in and he had a fight against Phil Davis, and Phil Davis choked him out in the first round with the Anaconda choke. And because of this, Gustafsson learned that, basically he wasn't as great of a fighter as he thought he was. And he actually went to Phil Davis, and he went to Phil Davis's camp and taught him or not taught him, I apologize, asked Phil Davis to teach him, how to be a better fighter. And that's what he's applied to his career, where he would come back to UFC and he would basically fight his way up to going after Jon Jones' championship at UFC 165 back in 2013. That was the show that was held in Toronto that my buddy Justin was at. Basically, with the decision, Jon Jones was able to win that fight, and he was able to keep the championship. But we will have to see what goes down. Gustafsson lost his last fight to Anthony Johnson, which Johnson used to move up to get the championship fight against Cormier. So this should be a good fight all around. I just hope that Gustafsson wins. I'm not the biggest Daniel Cormier fan, but Jon Jones being on the road back to recovery, I honestly don't even know if he would get the shot at whoever wins this fight, because I think that definitely Jon Jones, I don't know if he's been training this whole time or if he's just been taking time off due to being suspended and whatever, but I would just say that whoever wins this fight will probably have another fight before we see who fights Jon Jones, and that's what I think.